go through my whole presentation because we're very limited on
Just
time.
blame it on me.
Thank you, Bill. We loved your talk. So I have a whole presentation on Arundo donax, which is a non-native, it's an exotic species that's very invasive, and it is known from our Blanco River.
We got some. We can go out and find it.
Unfortunately, yes. Some of the big take-home messages: it can grow up to 4 inches a day during its growing season, so it's very fast-growing. It forms a monoculture. It's known from all over the United States. It likes wet stuff. This is on the Rio Grande. Everything that's this bright green color is Arundo, so it can choke out a river. It can cause a lot of problems. And really the take-home message of this presentation is because of our flood, it is flood spread. We could have it up and down the river, even more than we did before. So just keeping an eye out for it. It grows about 20 feet tall. That's around a 2-week-old plant right there. So yeah, it grows really fast. It can grow up within the trees, and so especially when we've lost trees and then we have this flood spread species that can grow very quickly right now, it's a real concern that it's going to find these niches where those trees have left and take over. This is actually a landowner who's mowing his Arundo, which hopefully will get stopped here soon. Just some pictures to show you it growing up in there. This is from 2013. We did an aerial survey of the Blanco River and found 306 locations of Arundo up and down the river. Most of those were around the city of Blanco and Wimberley. Really the worst part was around Blanco. Around half of those locations were within the 15-mile stretch around the city of Blanco. But it will continue to be spread downstream throughout the river. The reason you don't see a lot in this stretch and right there is because the river flows underground or has very little flow in those spots. This one little dot is right at the mouth of the Narrows, or at the top end of the Narrows actually. So it is all over our river already, but in clumps. It's not a continuous river species. So if you see it, there's this little flyer. It's on the table. Help stop the invasion. Don't cut it and throw it in the river or try and pull it if it's 6 feet tall. If it's a little plant, knee high or less, you can grab it close to the ground and pull it straight up. Just don't leave those roots anywhere where it's wet so that it'll not take root and regrow. And don't burn it. It's very, very flammable. There's some facts on the back if you want to read more about Arundo. And then there's another flyer up there about other invasive species. It also includes a little, it's got a little blurb about Arundo, then it's got a couple others that you may see. We do have feral hogs on the bottom, and that's a really important thing to look out for if you're able to hunt on your property and hunt, trap feral hogs. This is going to be a really important time to keep on top of those species that will be down in the riverbed. Even white-tailed deer will be very tough on your little seedlings that are coming up. So if we can keep them away from there, cage out our seedlings if we're able to do that. If you can find some of these eastern gamma grasses and cypress seedlings and those sorts of things that you want to have there, and cage them out if you're able to do that. Or hunting deer during deer season if we're able to keep on top of that, but especially the feral hogs because they are so damaging to the soil and also the seedlings. I just wanted to have a little summary slide where we pulled these workshops together really quickly. We wanted to be here to meet y'all, to start the conversation, to work together as organizations so that we're all carrying the same message. And so we're learning as we go. Each workshop we're learning things. We really appreciate y'all's suggestions. I've learned I need to make sure that Bill knows how to get here. And so yesterday one of the comments was there wasn't really anything that pulled our suggestions together or told landowners, this is where you can go home and start your recovery process. So, we talked a lot about an ideal world, what we would like to see, which is just leave those riverbanks alone. If everybody up and down the river would just leave it alone, the Blanco would heal and it would be this amazing lush green space. And if we could get used to seeing that and see that as beautiful, it would be such an amazing world. But that's really not the reality that we live in. People want to have their access. They want to be able to see the river from their houses a lot of times. Of course, we want to be able to get into the river. We want it to be safe for our kids, for ourselves. So limiting machinery, not taking bulldozers down there on those riverbanks, especially right now where it's still really saturated with water and you can do a lot of damage. So like you guys asked about moving debris down closer to the river where maybe plants could grow up there, I think you would be doing more harm than good. You'd be damaging the soil in such a way that the river would have a harder time repairing itself. And likely it's deposited those things where it needs them. So that's the best place for things to grow up there. If we can keep that machinery out of there, that's great. If you can't, there's recommendations out there for how to limit the impact of that. It includes putting down 8 inches of mulch and plywood sheets in order to protect the riverbank. I think if you really feel like you need to get machinery down there, give it some time so that the riverbank can start to heal, can start to recover. If you can give it 6 months and see if you can live with it, that's awesome. I find that a lot of things, if I let it go for a few months, then it's like, well, I'm kind of fine with it now. Right now, I think it's very shocking to get down there to our river, and there's this overwhelming heartbrokenness over what we had and what we lost. But I think if we can let that sit for a little while and let our river start to heal, that we can learn from the river and we can see what it should be and how lush and wonderful and full of life it can be. And maybe we can find a new love of the Blanco. Limiting contaminants. There's a lot of people that are using diesel to burn piles and are going to put fertilizers and pesticides down there. The river's very, very sensitive right now. All those aquatic species are really sensitive. It's a sensitive time of year anyway, with lots of spawning and tiny fish, and then we're going to be throwing contaminants in the river. We have trucks and cars in the river already, so there's already a lot of contaminants down there. If we can just back off on that and let our river have a little time to sit in the hospital bed and before we start smogging it out. If you need an access point, thinking about making those smaller and more cozy. This workshop has been so great because we're all family in this room, and I think if we can come to that place with our river where we can have our cozy little spot that's open and park-like for ourselves, and our cozy access spot, and a really good place for y'all if you haven't ever been there is Blue Hole in Wimberley. They've done an amazing job of having existing riparian, thick, luscious vegetation with these access points where you can get into the creek and use that creek and appreciate the beauty of the creek, and also have that riparian vegetation. Things that you can do going home today and moving forward on your own lands, on your properties, on your neighbors' properties, getting your neighbors involved. Melissa talked about photo points, and y'all saw how strong that was. If we can use this flood to help other people learn, and we can take photo points and have those to share with people in the future and be able to say, this is what happens if we just let it grow up, and when we, God forbid, have that next flood, if we can say we've got this riparian vegetation and look at how well it reacts to the flood when we have it built up and we have it the way that it wants to be, instead of constantly managing it in a way that makes it into a park that isn't a natural system here. Taking those photo points and monitoring what's happening there, learning your vegetation. That Remarkable Riparian Field Guide is amazing. It's got so much information in it. Even I am constantly going back to it and looking through it and using it in the field. It's really a great resource, and getting to know what's on your property and what those plants are and what they're doing there, how they're impacting riparian area in a positive way or in a negative way, and that applies to exotic species too, knowing what those are. And I kind of blew right through the exotic stuff, but sometimes those are forming a good capacity there. So Steve will probably hit on that while we're down at the river. But sometimes those exotics have taken such a hold that we really need to be slow and thoughtful about how we remove them so that we're not causing more harm than good. You've got your contact list for support on your properties, and we are hoping to host additional workshops where we get into more specific things. You saw today how we're all very passionate about riparian areas, about our rivers, about the health of the ecosystem, and I think we all love the Blanco as well. So it's hard for us to limit ourselves. We really went way blue over time. But we are going to go down to the river if people are still able to do that time-wise. We'll talk about what's happened down there, where we're seeing life already, where the river is starting to recover already, and how we can mesh these landowner goals with what the river needs. It's always going to be a balance of people and nature.